At 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard my son-in-law whispering into the phone. As soon as we get her committed to the psychiatric facility and then take care of my wife, all that money will be ours. I froze in the hallway, my heart hammering so loudly, I thought it might give me away. In that moment, I understood something with terrifying clarity. Either I fought back or I would be buried alive in the perfect plan he had already set in motion. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 67 years old, a widow, and for the last year I've been living with my daughter Laura and her husband Jason. After my husband Frank passed away, the house felt impossibly empty. The silence pressed in on me every evening, and the loneliness became unbearable. Moving in with Laura seemed like the right choice. I thought it would give us both comfort me the closeness of family and her the reassurance that I was not living alone. For a while, it worked. I cooked family dinners, tended to her little garden, and helped out wherever I could. I told myself that this was my fresh start, surrounded by love. But everything began to crumble the moment my doctor changed my blood pressure medication. The first few weeks were miserable. I was dizzy all the time, bumping into furniture like a drunk, misplacing my coffee cup 5 minutes after setting it down, forgetting whether I had locked the front door or turned off the stove. Ordinary side effects, the doctor assured me, just part of the adjustment period. Still, the fog in my head was humiliating. For a woman who had always prided herself on sharp memory and independence, those weeks left me vulnerable in ways I never imagined. It was during that fragile window that Jason started to look at me differently. His polite smile hid something darker, though at first I couldn't put my finger on it. I thought he was being protective, even concerned. In reality, he saw my confusion as an opportunity, a crack in the door he could pry open wider. What I didn't know then was that my temporary weakness would become the foundation for a twisted plan. And that late-night phone call was the moment I realized just how far Jason was willing to go. From the first polite concern to the steady drip of accusations, Jason's campaign was surgical in its patience. It started small, an offhand remark about me leaving the stove on a casual observation that I'd been seen wandering in my robe at night. He phrased everything with that practiced tone of worry, the kind that makes you feel both guilty and grateful at the same time. Laura is a nurse pulling long shifts at the hospital, bone-tired and emotionally raw, when she walked through the door, and Jason used that exhaustion like a tool. He understood exactly when she would be the most trusting, and he timed his reports accordingly. Jason did not make wild claims. He made a record. He turned ordinary slips, the headaches, the dizzy spells from my new blood pressure medication into evidence. He kept notes, took photographs, and had a labeled folder with dates. He learned to report incidents at moments when Laura would most trust him, late afternoons, after a double shift, early mornings before she had a chance to think. His timing was cruelly precise. I remember one evening clearly. I had stepped outside to check the roses by the kitchen window, and later Jason told Laura I'd been walking around in my nightgown at 2 a.m. He described it as if I'd been lost and dangerous to myself. Laura's face, already worn from work, tightened with concern. She started asking whether I felt safe, whether my forgetfulness was getting worse. Each question chipped away at my credibility. Small, ordinary mistakes were amplified. A coffee cup left on the counter became proof I couldn't remember things reliably. Misplaced keys were logged. Times when I genuinely forgot whether I'd locked the door were cited as irreversible decline. It was maddening to see a life of competence reduced to a stack of careful, damning observations. What I didn't see at first was how deliberately Jason staged the narrative. He wasn't merely worried, he was building a case. He cultivated Laura's sympathy like a gardener, tending fragile plants, watering it at precise intervals so it would grow and shade his intention. Because Laura loved me and wanted to do right, she accepted his evidence without the skepticism she would give a stranger. The pivot came on a night when I crept downstairs for water and heard Jason's voice low and urgent on the phone. He was speaking to someone I didn't recognize, then a name floated through Dr. Peterson. Phrases like involuntary commitment, emergency provisions, and testimony that will seal it reached me in fragments. My stomach dropped. I pressed myself to the hall wall and listened. It was worse than I had imagined. Jason discussed timing with a calm precision that made my skin crawl. He spoke of getting a physician to sign off filing paperwork to have me declared incompetent, arranging power of attorney, and making the whole thing look perfectly reasonable to a judge. He wasn't just trying to institutionalize me, he planned to control everything I owned. They even discussed numbers. Jason's voice softened when he mentioned the life insurance and my savings, an amount that would change the life he and Laura envisioned. In those hushed tones, money became the motive. In that instant, the house stopped feeling like home and began to feel like a case file I had to survive. Each morning after that, I watched how he curated the story. He would casually mention concerns to neighbors, slip a worried text to Laura during her shift, or leave a note for the mailman about strange behavior. Those small acts convinced others that my decline was real. I felt increasingly isolated, watched by a web of polite lies. When I first heard those words in the dark, him talking about committing me and taking everything, I felt the old panic rise. The kind that squeezes your throat and makes your hands go numb. Then, like a light switching on, I remembered something Frank had told me 1,000 times during his years on the force. When you spot a predator, Eleanor, don't show fear. Watch, record, gather facts. He wasn't a man who wasted breath on platitudes. He taught me to see things clearly. That memory steadied me in a way nothing else could. I forced myself to breathe and make a plan. There was no time for grand gestures, no room for dramatic stunts. I needed 3 simple, vital things done well: secure proof, protect our money, and find allies who would not blink when I said the words I could barely speak aloud. First, the evidence. I knew Jason's habits intimately: his morning shower, his careless leaving of his phone on the counter, how he used his birthday as the passcode. A knowledge born from living under the same roof became my advantage. One morning, when the shower ran hot and I could hear him humming over the tiles, I took his phone. My hands didn't shake. If anything, the calm was clinical. I scrolled through call logs and messages and found exactly what I feared: texts referencing package-delivered exchanges with a name I'd only heard once, Dr. Peterson, and instructions about dosing and timing. I photographed every thread, every timestamp, every casual, murderous line. I even had a photo of a message that read plainly that a certain sedative would make someone confused within 72 hours. Those images felt like armor, second money. Frank had always been cautious, maybe a little paranoid, but saved us from foolishness more than once. I'd learned how to move funds quietly, secondary accounts, a trust in another bank, small transfers that wouldn't trigger alarm bells, but would keep our money out of reach. I closed the online access Jason might have used and set up 2-factor protections. It was not glamorous work, just long calls, signatures, and the rustle of paperwork, but it mattered more than any confrontational scene I could imagine. Third allies. I could not and would not be the only voice in that house shouting wolf. So I called Ray Collins, Frank's old partner, whose voice still carried that same no-nonsense authority. Ray knew how to move without making a show of it. He understood evidence and procedure. I explained everything, walked him through the messages, and asked him to bring backup. He came with more than an old badge and a steady gaze. He came with people who knew how to gather the kind of proof a courtroom would respect. We agreed on 2 priorities: catch Jason in a way that would make it impossible for Laura to keep believing him, and do it without scaring her into denial. Ray and I planned so Laura would see the messages, the pharmacy records, the pattern of his concern. We wanted her to feel the facts in her hands, not just hear them from me. I wanted her to choose me again because she had seen the truth, not because I begged. Putting all this together made me feel oddly alive, focused, careful, and remarkably calm. I was no longer a passive figure in my own kitchen. I was the author of my one necessary chapter of the story. The next step was simple and brutal. Make sure Jason's arrogance, the sound of his morning shower, his certainty of victory became his undoing. The morning of the hearing dawned gray and damp, but Jason was practically glowing. He came down the stairs, humming, pouring himself coffee from the expensive machine he insisted we needed, straightening his tie as if he were heading to an awards ceremony. To him, this was the day he finally secured his victory. I kept my face blank, answering his questions with vague smiles and soft nods, the way he expected a confused old woman to respond. Inside, I was as sharp as glass. As soon as Jason disappeared upstairs for his shower, I moved quickly. The sound of water beating against tile was my signal. I opened the front door and Ray stepped inside, flanked by 2 female detectives in plain clothes. Their presence steadied me. I was no longer alone. Together, we walked down the hall, and with one quick turn of a key, we locked the bathroom door from the outside. Jason's voice floated out casual at first. "Eleanor, could you bring me a towel?" Then came the rattle of the handle, sharp, urgent. What the hell? The door's stuck? I didn't answer. Ray gave me a reassuring nod. For once, Jason was the one trapped. Within half an hour, Laura rushed home, still in her scrubs, her face pale with panic. "Mom, what's going on? Why are the police here? Where's Jason?" She looked at me like I was the one who had lost my grip on reality, and for a moment it stung. She wanted to believe in him so badly. The detectives didn't waste time. They sat her down at the kitchen table where all those whispered lies had been planted and began laying out evidence photographs of Jason's text messages, the call logs, the pharmacy records. Laura shook her head, at first tears forming, insisting there had to be an explanation. But then she saw it one message that read plainly, "Package delivered as promised." She should be properly confused within 72 hours. Her hand trembled as she read it aloud. 72 hours. "Mom, he poisoned your coffee." I reached for her hand, squeezing gently, but my daughter pulled back, burying her face in her palms. The realization was too much. Her husband, the man she trusted with her heart, had been carefully, methodically plotting to kill her mother. From behind the locked bathroom door, Jason's voice broke in. "Laura, don't listen to them. It's all a misunderstanding. Your mother is paranoid. That doctor said it happens at her age." The detective cut him off by reading aloud a record from the pharmacy, a recent purchase of sedatives in Jason's name drugs that had no prescription on file. The final nail. Laura's grief turned to fury. She stood abruptly, eyes red but blazing. "Jason," she shouted toward the bathroom, "you tried to kill my mother for money. For money, I don't want to hear another word. I don't ever want to see you again." There was silence, then the sound of fists pounding against the door. "Laura, wait. I can explain." His voice cracked with desperation, but it was useless. Ray unlocked the door and 2 officers stepped inside. Jason emerged wrapped in only a towel, dripping water across the floor, his face twisted with rage and humiliation. He tried to regain his usual charm, reaching toward Laura. "Honey, please, this is all taken out of context. We can fix this." But Laura backed away, shaking her head. Her voice was low, steady, and final. "No, you've destroyed everything. You were going to destroy her, and in the process, you destroyed me. I have nothing left to say." The handcuffs clicked shut, echoing through the house. Jason, who had strutted through these rooms like a king, was led out like a criminal. For the first time in months, the air inside my home felt clean. I had survived his lies, and now with my daughter, finally seeing the truth, I knew we would survive the wreckage together. Justice did not come quickly, but it came. Jason was sentenced to 30 years in prison for conspiracy fraud and attempted murder. Dr. Peterson, the man who had so casually risked my life for a payday, lost his license and received 15 years behind bars. Their names became warnings instead of threats. Laura, my daughter, filed for divorce the very next day. She threw away the life she had built with Jason and started therapy to rebuild herself. It was not easy, but week by week I saw her stand taller, smile more honestly, and begin to trust her own judgment again. She was healing, and I was proud of her. As for me, I chose to live, not just survive, but truly live. I tended my roses again, baked on Sundays, walked in the evenings, and laughed with neighbors over coffee that no longer carried poison. Most of all, I cherished my time with Laura. After all we had been through, we found each other again. The bond between mother and daughter had never been stronger. There are lessons I want you to take with you. Never underestimate how manipulative someone inside your own family can be. Do not dismiss small red flags just because they come from someone close. And remember, this older does not mean powerless. Careful observation, a written note, a saved message. Those things can protect your life. Finally, real family is built on respect. Without it, love becomes control, and control becomes abuse. Thank you for listening to my story. If you have ever faced betrayal or felt dismissed, share your experience in the comments below. And please follow Real Her Stories, like and share this video so that other women know they are not alone. We all deserve love. We all deserve respect.